Hello everybody, welcome into the Hobby Bar. This is Jason, welcome. So today we'll be working on this figure. It's a 3D sculpt by RN Studios. I think it's called Dalila. Got it printed by Nerd House Minis, and I have a few others that I ordered from them, from the same sculptor. But as you can see, I just have it primed up. Doesn't have a base with it, so I'll have to figure out something for that. And yeah, I made a kind of a break from GW stuff. Speaking of which, though, let's see. Next time we might break out some of these snake ladies, but you know, a little base there. This one's missing it, so I just gotta use one of my spare bases that I have lying around. Anyway, that's that. If you do any hobbying, feel free to jump in, join along, and get some stuff done. If not, that's cool too. Glad you're hanging out with us anyway. And this one's gonna be a long one, just to let you all know. So yeah, we'll get some stuff done and move along. But with that, let's dive into this figure. So first up, here we are with some Vallejo Cold Flesh. It's part of their Fantasy Pro set of like alternate flesh tones. Don't mind my little magnifier eye stuff poking in there. That'll happen a lot because I wanted to use them a bit more just to get used to them, and I kept peeking under the camera without realizing it, so don't mind those little eyes that'll sneak in maybe my head from time to time. But what I wanted to do was get this down as a first initial base coat. I've tried using this stuff a little bit before, and to various degrees of success, because they're sort of alternate colors, and I wanted to do the cold flesh version on this figure, just for something different and to play around with them more, see if I'm used to how to sort of transition between the colors a bit more. I do think I'm getting closer to where I need to be though with it, so that's good. But also, yeah, we'll do a bit of mixing later, but I won't really show that in the current paint card. Yeah, this stuff's fun to work with. It's actually pretty darn good too. I think for some reason I think it's a little better than most of their other stuff. I'm not sure why, at least for the Vallejo stuff. Because some of those paints, I don't know, they don't quite agree with me for some reason. Can't quite figure it out, though it seems to be working a bit better lately. But anyway, back to the cold flesh. This I'm using just as sort of the base to middle tone. Well, not really mid-tone. Sort of a base color for the skin. This way, when we put on the pale flesh and white flesh as highlight colors, and the frozen flesh for more of a wash type color, it'll have this sort of purplish hue to fall back on or be over, so that all of it kind of binds back together. We're gonna have quite a doozy here, so if you can tell from the total time. But anyway, go ahead and stop talking about the cold flesh for now, because pretty sure we'll come back to it later to do some touching up and stuff. I also didn't want to put some on the body, because I kind of wanted to try more transparent clothing stuff, just to try it, because it's a fun exercise, so yeah. We'll wrap this up though with this paint, and I'll catch up with y'all here shortly for the next color. Alrighty, here we are moving on to Cephalopod Studios Harlot Red. At least we would if the nozzle weren't coming out, and oh, that's why. One thing, one thing that has annoyed me with dropper bottles is sometimes, for whatever reason, they just like to leak inside the cap there. Don't really know why, but it does annoy me a bit. And if enough of it builds up, you can get what happened to me there at the beginning there, which is just the nozzle tip will come out with it. Doesn't happen very often, but when it happens, it's kind of annoying. Thankfully, just screwing it on and unscrewing it did fix that issue, but it's kind of funny to have happen. But what I wanted to do with the Harlot Red here, since it's kind of a reddish purple, was use it as a base coat for the hair. Because I kind of wanted her to have red hair going on. Just because I figured it'd go well with the purplish skin. So that's why we're going to do Harlot Red here as the base coat for hair. I wasn't quite there with the skin tone yet, so I do have to bring this back later for the eyebrows and stuff. But for now, I figured we'll just block it in, see how it kind of looks. And if I'm kind of happy with how it is, then we'll continue with it. If not, that's fine. We can figure out something else at this point. That's why it's just an initial, relatively thin base layer. But catch up with y'all here shortly for the next paint, where we do a little bit of mixing. Alrighty, here we are moving on to Vallejo Pale Flesh. Again, part of the Nocturna Fantasy Pro line that they have. I did mix this with a little bit of the Cold Flesh. This way it's not as stark of a transition right away. And I swapped over to a size 1 liner brush, I believe is what that is. This way I have a slightly finer tip while I'm working on this. But, yeah. Again, this is a slight mixture of pale flesh and cold flesh. This way I have that in-between color. Well, kind of. And I'm not just going straight to the, pale flesh, because if I did that, it's a very strong transition. So that's why I kind of wanted this in-between color first, just to sort of give me that, transition a bit better. But, going over all of it, most of the raised areas on it this time, yeah, it's, quite a bit of a project here. I did want to see how far I could take a mini in basically 2 hours of recording, so that's why there's going to be a lot of footage. I did take a few breaks here and there, to, type stuff out on the keyboard, chat with people and stuff, so that's why it's not quite an hour-long piece of footage, or an hour-long video. It's running at 2 times speed, but yeah. I figured 45 minutes on this one might be nice to see one taken from basically a prime to almost done. Next time, might have a few things and we can talk about that later in the last call. But basically what I was doing here was, getting all, I already explained that, getting all the midtones built up. And next, we'll go into just pale flesh. You can kind of see me prepping it over there in the corner, maybe. But, yeah, we'll transition here to just pale flesh instead of doing the mixture. And this one, I'm kind of using a little bit away from where the half and half was. Basically, it was 1 part cold flesh and 1 part pale flesh. And now I'm just using pale flesh. Again, makes the transition a bit better to do it. To do an in-between, I've noticed with these paints. Just because the pale flesh, it's kind of bright, again, compared to the color for all the other sort of mid-tones that they put in this set. But anyway, we'll go ahead and go around using this pale flesh over the mini, and yeah, I'll catch up with you all here shortly for the next paint. Alrighty, here we are moving on to Vallejo Frozen Flesh. Again, part of the Fantasy Pro line that Vallejo has. And initially here I was trying to just sort of force it into the recesses. Wasn't quite happy with how that turned out, so quickly getting the brush wet and coming back in and basically erasing it with a wet brush to knock it back. Then I added a bit more water to the mixture and come back in with it, and now it's basically a shade paint, or a wash paint in consistency, and that's what I was looking for. I already did add a bit of the Merlin's Magic medium there from Cephalopod Studios, which is kind of my favorite medium at the moment. It's real good. So I added a bit of that to the frozen flesh first to see if that was the right consistency. When it wasn't, I added a bit of water and now it's right where I wanted it for consistency. Do have to add a bit of water every now and then though, since I'm adding in some paint that doesn't quite have the right consistency, and back and forth. Even though it's on a wet palette over there, it just keeps the consistency where you have it set basically, instead of really wetting it down. So yeah, do have to kind of keep an eye on it yourself. But basically, yeah, using this as a shade, try to get into all the recesses, and yeah, that's about it for their frozen flesh. So going back to cold flesh for Vallejo again. This is shortly after the frozen flesh bit. Basically right after, because I kind of wanted it to blend a little bit better. And since the frozen flesh was so thin, I can kind of work near it and kind of get a bit of blending. But yeah, basically coming in here with the cold flesh and just making sure that the frozen flesh isn't anywhere that it shouldn't be, and kind of cleaning up some areas, sort of working on the in-between transitions between cold flesh and pale flesh as well, since I'm building up another layer here. Another thin layer, but it's still another layer. We can sort of start working on those transitions. Speaking of which, coming back in with pale flesh now. Just one after the other here. But yeah, now we have to kind of rebuild up those mid to highlight tones, and I got a little bit happy there on the face, so quickly wiped it with my thumb and it was good to go. Didn't need to remember to hit the hands too, which I kept forgetting about the hands for some reason. Not sure why I did. Kind of was focused on just getting the rest of the skin good to go. Yeah. Not really sure why that was though, but just happened. Kind of got a laser focus there. Anyway, we'll go ahead and continue rebuilding up the pale flesh again after the effectively wash of the frozen flesh. And I'll catch up with you here shortly for the next color. Alrighty, here we are busting out Vallejo White Flesh, and this is going to be basically the final highlight color over everything. Again, we're kind of going to have to come back in later and do a bit of touch-up, but this is just the initial application of it for the final highlight color. Sort of a pinkish whitish flesh tone instead of sort of a grayish one like the pale flesh is. But yeah, I kind of like this group of 4 colors. I got it to work a lot better than the more purpley malefic flesh 4 paints that they do, or they recommend using together. And I haven't really tried the 4 skin yet, but that one should be interesting too, since that's more a greenish flesh tone. But yeah, just working here with the white flesh. Again, I am painting over the sort of torso area. Um, Painting it like skin, even though it's, a, oh, what would you call it? Kind of it's a one-piece thing anyway. So it is a piece of clothing. I kind of wanted to make it a bit sheer though, just to try it out. So that's why I'm doing it in skin tones right now. And then I'll go over here later with another paint. Anyway, speaking of other paints, we'll go ahead and finish up this process here with the white flesh this time. And then I'll catch up with you shortly for the next paint. Alrighty, here we are moving on to Cephalopod Studios Crawdaddy Red. I just can't get away from this red paint. Anyway, I wanted to build up to a very strong, very bright red for the hair, instead of just leaving it sort of that reddish purplish color. So we're busting out the Crawdaddy Red and getting on in here to really make it that, I kind of want to say fire engine red color, but yeah, we're gonna make it that really strong red color for the hair. That's what I decided on for the hair. I was like, I kind of like how this is going, and Space Coat works. Let's take it to the next step and get that mid-tone filled in with the actual Crawdaddy Red. But yeah, I just can't get away from this paint, man. Anyway, we'll go ahead and finish doing up the hair, because it's just gonna be the hair on top for now. Don't quite hit eyebrows quite yet, though. Do give it a shot later, at least. So yeah, we'll go ahead and finish this process up, and I'll catch up with you here shortly for the next paint. Alrighty, here we are moving on to Cephalopod Studios Black Knight. I kind of wanted to use Black Knight just to see how it would look over the boots and stuff. And this was the paint I was going to use for the torso swimsuit thing, body piece, one piece, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. I don't know the names of all the clothing, but this is what I'll use since it's a fairly thin paint, like most of their paints are. I figured it would go over real easily to basically give it that sheer appearance. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, actually. So we will go ahead and do the boots up in this first, though, just to kind of see if I can get comfortable with it. And I wasn't quite sure if I wanted these to be like leggings or if I wanted them to actually be like boots. And in the end, I did decide to just leave them straight flat black boots instead of like leggings or socks or whatever, because that to me doesn't quite make sense. I mean, neither does her attire in general, but whatever. I at least wanted these to not be like really long socks for whatever reason. But anyway, we'll finish up with Black Knight here, and I'll catch up with y'all here shortly for the next paint. Alrighty, here we are moving on to some Citadel Caliban Green. It's a much lighter green than the other one I used previously, which is like Lauren Forest, which is more a olive drabish green, I would say. So this is just a green, and I kind of wanted her flowy cloak bits to be green. Initially, I was thinking brown, make it just leather, but then I was like, I think it would look better green. So we ended up going for green here, and it's kind of a bit too strong of a green initially. I'm not gonna lie. And by that I mean it's a very bright green, but I think it's a good base to start from, and then just wash and darken it up. And we can you'll kind of see that process going through my head here later. Because I break out some of the Vallejo game ink to go over this. And then we just go over it with a black wash in the end. Just to kind of knock it back and make it a dark green. Instead of leaving it this bright green. Because we can always come back and highlight folds and stuff to make it into the bright green if it's not quite where we want it after all this washing. Though it's pretty darn close with where I want it anyway. But we'll go ahead and cover all of these folds with the Caliban Green here. And yeah, I also do hit the sleeves and a bit of the back part of the, I guess, jacket, whatever you would call it, with the green as well. Just because I was like, kind of puffy sleeves. I guess it can be the same color as the tattered jacket, robe kind of thingy. It's all over the place back here. But yeah, we'll go ahead and finish up here on this, getting everything nice and built up. And I'll catch up with you all here shortly for the next paint. Alrighty, here we are moving on to Cephalopod Studios Harlot Red again. So for this, kind of had to get in here because usually I don't do like eyebrows and stuff because they're kind of a pain. They'd be really small on these figures. But on this one, they were kind of molded on, so I was like, you know what? Let's give it a shot. And coming in with the base paint for her hair, the Harlot Red, because figured if I can just do it in Harlot Red, that should be good enough for at this scale to look good, and I was kind of happy with it. I did have to flatten out the bristles a bit using my nail as sort of a dry palette to control it. Pretty happy with how it turned out though. Now we're moving on to Pale Flesh from Vallejo. And I wanted to come in here just to kind of touch it up a little bit around the eyebrows. Make sure that everything was nice and tidy around the face. Just because I did kind of get some elsewhere. And then since I was touching up the face, it's like, well, I don't want the face to be a slightly different hue than the other skin. So gotta add a bit of pale flesh everywhere else, basically. It's skinned. So come in here on all the other skin parts and get a little bit of pale flesh on all of that too. Then we move on to white flesh. Basically do the same thing. Since I have to re-highlight a little bit on the face, just a very little bit. I do kind of make it a little bit too thin though when it gets into the recesses, so I had to quickly fix that. But then we come back in with white flesh, just a little bit, just to re-highlight and make sure things are picked out well and stand out a bit. Do apologize for the for the leaf blower going on. They're back. But yeah, we'll go ahead and re-highlight with white flesh. I'll catch up with you here shortly for the next paint. Alrighty, here we are breaking out the Vallejo Gaming Black Green, as it's called. So I wanted to use this to knock back the brightness, basically, on the Caliban Green. So the gaming stuff is typically very strong. I did dilute it a bit with some of the magic medium from Cephalopod Studios. So yeah, and I will be muting for some parts of this because I was kind of watching something or listening to something a little entertaining. So yeah, I kept chuckling in the background and feel like it might be a bit disturbing, so I'll go ahead and leave that out. So we'll be muting here a few times, and then towards the end of this, I will have to mute it because I was chatting with had to be chatting with a friend for a bit while I was recording, like a dummy, but it's fine. No big deal there. But anyway, we'll go ahead and finish up with the gaming here, and I'll catch up with you here shortly for the next paint. Alrighty, here we are moving back into Vallejo Pale Flesh again. Oh man, we just can't escape this color. But at this point I noticed the hands were a different hue, so I was like, oh no, I kept missing the hands. I was so focused on everything else. So, had to come in and patch up the hands a bit with the Pale Flesh. But anyway, we'll go ahead and get that knocked out real quick, and I'll catch up with you shortly for the next paint. Alrighty, here we are swapping out for Citadel Abaddon Black. Wasn't quite thinking that building up a lot of layers of Black Knight would get us there, so I just wanted to bring in the big guns as it is with the Abaddon Black, just to get these boots. Let's just make them black boots at this point. Do kind of have to lean in here because some of these are kind of small areas, and I want to make sure I don't get any of it on the now basically done green paint. So do kind of have to lean in here and do that. I'm also trying to get used to using these magnifiers. They're technically like watch repair ones. They're not really the best for this because I shouldn't use both lenses at the same time. But I can swap out the lenses on each eye and make them different, so I kind of like that. Though for mini painting, I think you still want your depth perception, so maybe not the best. But just for checking how things look at a little bit closer, it's pretty good for that, which is basically all I wanted it for. Since usually I'm painting for effectively tabletop standard most of the time. But yeah. Go ahead and finish up both those boots though, and then there were basically straps connecting the hip armor plates, and I wanted to use some of the Abaddon Black on those as well. Those are kind of thin up there, so we do swap brushes here and when we get to those, and then yeah, we'll go ahead and finish this up with Abaddon Black. Anyway, we'll continue this process, and I'll catch up with you here shortly for the next paint. Alrighty, here we are moving on to Citadel Retributor Armour. Wanted to make this plating all gold, just because with the cooler flesh tone and warm hair, and then effectively neutral boots color, kind of wanted a bit more of a warmer metal. So wanted to bring in the gold here. Could have done Balthazar gold for sort of a old coppery gold, but I figured we'll keep it simple. We'll just make it gold. And then looking back at it, kind of is effectively a gender bent Guan Yu. But I'm like, can kind of see it, but whatever. We'll just roll with it. Gold armor, green cloak, all that. But anyway, for the Retributor armor, I did add a bit of the magic medium again, just because for metallics, though they tend to be really good when they're just out of the pot for Citadel stuff, just a touch of water, and they tend to be really good. This one is a little bit older, and I had to add a bit of medium into the pot by itself anyway. And I find still adding a little bit of medium makes it go on a lot smoother, and it's really nice. So, still added a bit of medium to the gold here, and yeah. Um, I decided to make the sort of breastplate area gold as well. Just, we'll make all the armor gold, effectively. Even though I think it's not really meant to be metal armor there. We're gonna make it metal armor anyway, because heck with it. Yeah, we'll go ahead and get all of the gold parts on her gold. So the armor plating all over the place, and then the bands around her legs, and then her shoes will also end up being gold. But this process will take a little while, so yeah, we'll go ahead and get this done eventually. It's not quite fully finished. I do want to put a wash over it, come back, and then build up the color again, and then highlight it with a different gold. But that's for next time, when we also figure out what we're going to do for a base for this. Because not quite sure what we're going to do for that right now. But anyway, that's for next time. This time, we'll go ahead and finish up all this armor and get her basically done, but not quite fully there. But with that, we'll go ahead and finish this up, and I'll catch up with you all here shortly for the next paint. Though not quite as shortly as the previous time. Alrighty, here we are bringing out the Cephalopod Studios Black Wash. Again, breaking this out because I wasn't quite happy with how the dark green was. So, I wanted to use some of the Black Wash here to really knock it back and make it that dark green that I initially wanted with the, for the green color. Yeah, the gaming just didn't quite knock it down enough, so we go over it with a black wash. Nice and simple. I'll probably come back in and re-highlight some of these folds in the cloth and stuff and pick it back out, but this is about where the color I wanted it to end up was. Just a nice strong dark green. But yeah, we go ahead and wash over all the green bits with this, and then yeah, we're kind of almost done for the day with this piece. But yeah, we'll wrap this up and I'll catch up with you here shortly for the next paint. Alrighty, here we are busting out some Leadbelcher. So, wanted to use some Leadbelcher on the sword here. Just basic metal sword. Nothing too fancy. Again, did kind of, thin it out with a bit of medium. Just because, again, I feel like it helps out the metallics a lot, just to keep them smooth, since they're metal flakes in there. I do true metal TMM instead of NMM. So, yeah. Yeah. Just nice standard Leadbelcher sword. Anyway. Nothing really fancy to talk about here for this process. But yeah, we'll finish this up and I'll catch up with you here shortly for the next paint. Alrighty, here we are breaking out the Snakebite leather contrast paint. I wanted to use this on the collar, effectively, because, she has sort of a collar of the jacket that can be seen from the front, and I had left it, white because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it in there, and then I'm like, well, let's just make it leather in there, that should be okay, and I think it works fine. Then I noticed there is technically like a choker around her neck, so I was like, what are we gonna do about that? And we'll get to that here shortly. And here we are trying to come in with the Retributor Armour and grab that choker real fast. So, just knocking that out real quick, trying to keep it tidy. The previous section and this one were the parts that were muted, if you were interested, just because I was chatting with a friend. But with that, last call everybody, last call. So, that's a lot of work in one day for me. Usually I get distracted and do other things, but for whatever reason, today I can just kind of focus in and get this mostly knocked out. Again, next time we'll probably figure out what to do about the base fur and get the metals built up, then varnish, and yeah, basically call her done at that point. Don't think it needs much else done to it. I might darken up the, put a bit of frozen flesh on her lips, maybe, to darken them, instead of leaving them the same color as the rest of her face, but I'll take a look at that and figure it out for next time. Anyway, with that, hope y'all enjoyed, hope y'all got stuff done, and appreciate y'all hanging out for a while today. And I'll catch up with y'all here next week for finishing up this mini, hopefully in 2 weeks instead of a long time. Anyway, take care out there, everyone. I appreciate y'all swinging by. So have a good one out there.